Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this um, preview for our field trip to the Flight 93 National Memorial. First of all, thank you for signing up to go on the field trip. I think this will be a good trip. It's an extraordinary memorial, an amazing physical space, what they've done with it, the symbolism. I'll talk a little bit about that today as part of this course. So thank you for signing up to go on the field trip, and thank you for signing up for this preview, because hopefully by virtue of taking a few minutes today, we'll take maybe not quite the whole hour, but we'll take a few minutes today, hopefully by giving you a sense of what to expect at the memorial, you'll have an even better experience on the trip. So again, thank you very much for your interest in the trip and also in this course, or this one-day course. I thought it would be helpful to start with some background. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the events of 9/11, 2001, but just for establishing an historical baseline for what you'll be seeing, for some of the things that you will hear and see as part of the exhibits, I thought it was useful to provide some background. And it is hard to believe it's been 22 years. So sometimes a historical refresher is important and helpful for many reasons. The memorial that we're going to be visiting is to United Airlines Flight 93. So it's called the Flight 93 National Memorial. And the flight number 93, as you see there in the background, was a daily flight United flew from Newark, New Jersey, to San Francisco, California. And the plane they typically used for that flight was a Boeing 757, which had a capacity for about 180 passengers, closer to 200 with crew. So this was a large jet airliner. On this particular day, September the 11th, 2001, it was not even close to being a full flight. As you see there, only 33 passengers and 7 crew, for a total of 40 victims as designated by the act that created the National Memorial. They do not count the 4 terrorists in with the 40 victims. So a total of 44 souls on board the flight, 33 passengers, 7 crew, and 4 terrorist hijackers were on the plane on 9/11. The plane was delayed in taking off that morning from Newark. When it finally got in the air, a lot of the events, the other events of that tragic day had already started to unfold, including, I think, the first plane perhaps had struck the first tower at the World Trade Center. So events were already beginning to unfold that morning when this flight, well, I take that back. I don't think that the first flight had struck the World Trade Center yet. If it had, this Flight 93 might not have taken off at all. But it was very soon thereafter. Flight 93 took off from Newark, and very soon thereafter, I think the first plane flew into the World Trade Center. So events were unfolding quickly. Those of you obviously will remember the chaos of that day, all of the uncertainty, all of the rumors that were swirling around, even as things were literally happening live on television. And we were seeing them all for the first time. So the plane took off, Flight 93 from Newark, and was about 45 minutes into its flight to San Francisco when it was hijacked, when the 4 terrorists who were on the flight effected a hijacking and took control of the flight, burst into the cabin, took control of the flight. And at that point, the hijackers turned the plane around. It was somewhere over Ohio, and started flying it back toward Washington, D.C. And although I don't think this has ever been definitively determined, I think most investigations, most reports about the events of this day have concluded that the probable intended target for Flight 93, had the hijackers been successful in executing their plan, they were going to hijack the flight, turn it around, and fly it back toward Washington and ultimately into the United States Capitol, the Capitol building itself on Capitol Hill. So obviously, one of 4 airline-related attacks, 2 of them attacking the World Trade Center in New York, one of them flying into the Pentagon just outside of Washington, D.C., and then this 4th plane, this 4th attack, which was intended, we think, to strike the U.S. Capitol building. Of course, again, as we know, the passengers on board Flight 93 ultimately were the ones who prevented that plan from coming to pass. The passengers decided that they needed to take action to try and thwart the hijackers' intent. Because, of course, the passengers on Flight 93 were getting, again, very chaotic, intermittent communications from family members and friends on the ground. Some of them were accessing news stories on their cell phones, and so they were beginning to get, as the flight was hijacked and had been turned around and was headed back toward DC, the passengers on board the flight were getting the sense that this might be, this plane, this hijacking that they were a part of, might be part of a larger series of terrorist attacks. And in fact, it was. So the passengers decided to try to retake the plane, try to retake control of the flight, and to prevent the hijackers from whatever their ultimate intention and target were. The last message from the plane, the last piece of data taken from the flight recorder, came in at about 10:03, just a few minutes after 10 o'clock in the morning on 9/11. And at that point, just a second or two later, the plane crashed in a rural area, basically a farming area in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. As you see, they're about 150 miles from Washington, D.C. So the hijackers had managed to turn the plane around and get it back over Pennsylvania, and were very much on their way back to D.C. and only about 150 miles away from D.C. when the passengers put their plan into effect, tried to retake control of the plane. In the course of that conflict, that back and forth between the passengers and the hijackers, the plane did crash, killing everyone aboard. And the photograph you see there on the right hand side of your screen, obviously the plume of black smoke is from the crash itself. But I think this photo is also significant because you get a sense of sort of the rural farming nature of this area around Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So this is a photo from the Friends of Flight 93 group. And I'm going to guess and say this flight, or this photo, was probably taken a couple of miles away from the crash site, but you see the plume of smoke there, and you see the red barn and sort of the rural nature of the area. Again, you'll get a chance to see this in person when we drive to the memorial. We'll drive through this sort of rolling hills, rural farming area, and you'll have the chance to see that area for yourself. So that's the historical background about the events of 9/11. Of course, a singularly tragic day in many ways, and there will be more information available at the memorial regarding the historical context and the background, but I wanted to give you again that baseline in order to help enhance your experience at the memorial. There certainly will be additional information available, and at the end of today's presentation, I'm going to provide you with some websites and some additional resources that you might want to watch or read or consult prior to the trip, again, to increase your understanding of the events and the context. Shortly after the plane crashed and after the nation had taken stock of what had happened on 9/11, of course, there were a lot of calls to memorialize the many people in New York and Washington and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, who had died. In the case of certainly the Flight 93 passengers and crew, people who had sacrificed their lives in order to prevent the continuation of that aspect of the terrorist attack, the use of that plane to attack some other target, again, probably the US Capitol. And so Public Law 107-266, simply meaning the 107th Congress passed the law, was passed in 2002, and it, as I quote there from the law, the purpose was to authorize a national memorial to commemorate the passengers and crew of Flight 93 who on September 11th, 2001, gave their lives, thereby thwarting a planned attack on our nation's capital. So that was the purpose of the federal act creating a national memorial to Flight 93, its passengers, and its crew. So once that law, that bill was passed and signed into law, then began the long and complicated work of actually designing and creating and paying for and maintaining a national memorial, the one we're going to see in 2 weeks. And so here we have now shifting gears from the historical context and the legal basis for having the memorial in the first place to the memorial itself, what you will actually see when we're on site. It was dedicated on September 10th, 2011, so part of the 10-year commemoration of the 9/11 events. This memorial was dedicated as part of that. It has been expanded since then. That initial dedication was the visitor center. I'll talk about a couple of additional parts of the memorial that have been added since then, but the initial and official dedication of the National Memorial was on the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. So what does the National Memorial consist of? Well, it consists really of 4 areas, 4 elements. The first is the Wall of Names and the Memorial Plaza. I'll show you a photograph of that in just a moment, but this is really intended to identify those 33 passengers, those 7 crew members who sacrificed their lives as part of trying to prevent this plane from being used as a weapon. And so the Wall of Names exists to memorialize those individuals. And the Memorial Plaza is the area that surrounds the wall of names. That's really the first element, and perhaps the most important one, because it does identify the individuals by name who are involved. There is a visitor center with a very extensive exhibit space. And again, we will have the chance to go to the visitor center, and they have informational displays, historical exhibits that provide a lot more information about the plane, about the incident itself, about the people who lost their lives that day. Very well organized and very informative area at the visitor center. More recently, I think it was in 2018, they finished work on the Tower of Voices. And this is just a little bit removed from the visitor center and from the Memorial Plaza and from the Wall of Names. It's certainly in the same general area, but we'll drive just a bit to get to it. It's really not within walking distance. But the Tower of Voices is an additional monument to the 40 people who died, and each person is memorialized in the Tower of Voices with a wind chime. And again, I'll show you a photograph of that in just a moment. But this is perhaps the most, well, it's all extremely emotionally affecting. But the Tower of Voices is special because when you're there at any point, and the wind is blowing, even if the wind is blowing just very low speed, it can still create resonance within the chimes in this tower. And listening to that really does create a very contemplative and commemorative experience. Excuse me for just 1 second. I've got a phone call coming, and I need to place it on mute. I think that did the trick. Okay. Or maybe not. I think that did the trick. So the Tower of Voices is something we will see probably on our way out, on our way away from the national monument, the National Memorial. But it's, again, very affecting, very emotional because of the sounds, the very haunting sounds that you'll hear coming from the wind chimes. And then finally, the fourth element, in addition to the visitor center, the Memorial Plaza, the Wall of Names, the Tower of Voices, there's also the surrounding grounds. And it is a beautiful space with a lot of room for walking, for contemplation, for sort of taking it all in. So I'll show you all of these things, but I wanted to outline for you the things, the elements of the National Memorial and what we'll be seeing during our trip. Here is a photograph of the Memorial Plaza and the Wall of Names. And again, no photograph can really do it justice, but you can see there on the left the marble edifice, and there are names on each one of those marble edifices, and each name corresponds to one of the 40 passengers and crew on the flight. In this photograph, in the distance behind and sort of off in the distance behind the Wall of Names, is the concrete edifice, and that is the visitor center. And so we'll see that in just a moment. But this sort of gives you a sense of scale. You arrive at the visitor center, we'll park our bus at the visitor center, and then there's a very gently sloping path. Often every time I've been here, they've had beautiful wildflower displays along the path leading from the visitor center down to the Memorial Plaza, down to the Wall of Names. and we'll have the chance to walk down that path and see this wall of names. Incredibly dramatic, and dramatic, I think, in large part because of its simplicity. Very eloquent because of its simplicity. 40 names on marble edifices, each one representing a person who died that day. So that's the Memorial Plaza and the Wall of Names, with the visitor center in the background there for perspective. This is the visitor center itself. So this is probably the first thing we will see when we get there and get off the bus. Again, it's a very nice visitor center with exhibition space, of course, restroom facilities. There is a gift shop there, so it's a full service visitor center. But again, the information that it provides in its displays and exhibits about the flight and the events of that day are certainly worth seeing. So spending some time in the visitor center before going to see the Wall of Names and the Memorial Plaza is generally a good idea, generally a good sequence, because the visitor center provides you, again, with that background information and that context, and tells you more about what you're going to be seeing when you walk down the path to the Wall of Names. And then here is a photograph of the Tower of Voices. Again, the couple of visits I made to the memorial not long after it opened, this was not yet built. This, as I say, this I think was completed in 2018, and maybe in 2019. So it's been a part of the memorial now for about 4 or 5 years. And again, words really can't do it justice. So I'll just let the image speak for itself. And of course, what is most dramatic and most effective about it is when you have the chance to hear it and hear the wind resonating the 40 chimes. Just a remarkable sort of feeling that it creates. So this is the Tower of Voices, and it is, again, a bit removed from the visitor center and the Wall of Names. When we are exiting the memorial on the bus, we will take a side road and park at this Tower of Voices so that you'll have the chance to see it, hear it, but it is not within walking distance of the other elements or the other parts of the memorial. But again, incredibly effective and dramatic way to commemorate those lost lives. And then finally, I do want to provide you with a sense of the surrounding grounds, because this is a very large memorial. There's a lot going on here, in addition to the visitor center and the Wall of Names and the Tower of Voices. Again, sort of thinking about how we'll come into the site, it'll be from, in this picture, from the top. And you'll see that we'll come down to the Visitor Center complex. That'll be our first destination, the parking lot. You see the parking lot marked right there. Visitor Center complex, very easily accessible from the parking lot. And then you'll have the chance, once you are at the Visitor Center, to walk down what they call this Western Overlook Trail through the field of wildflowers to the Memorial Plaza, to the Wall of Names, and then to sites that are not open to the public. Marked here, impact site. There is a boulder, a very large boulder that has been placed at the site where the plane came to rest after it crashed. That is not accessible to the public. You can see it from a distance. You can actually see it from the Memorial Plaza from when you're standing at the wall of names, you can look out and see the impact site and see the boulder, but you're not permitted to walk out to it. That is considered sacred ground and not open to public visitation, but it is visible. Beyond the hemlock grove, behind the boulder where the plane came to rest, is the debris field. That is also off limits, but you'll hear and read more about that at the visitor center, about the process of recovering the remains of people on the flight, doing the forensic examination of the flight itself, collecting the physical debris from the crash. All of that is explained in detail as part of the exhibits at the visitor center. But here is the debris field where the most of the plane's physical elements were ultimately discovered. But then, in addition to all of that, you have this very large circular space. Walking trails marked in yellow, and then a ring road marked in white. I don't know whether we'll take the bus around there. In fact, we might want to have the bus drop us off at the visitor complex and then come back around and pick us up at the shelter, which is at the much more close to the wall of names and the Memorial Plaza, so that you have the chance to see everything and not have to walk back up to the visitor center. That may be the best logistical way to organize this. But this, again, all of this space that you see here on the right side of your screen, the Trail of Remembrance, the small ponds marked in blue, the walking paths marked in yellow, beautiful, natural, peaceful kinds of spaces that really do encourage contemplation. And so we'll have the chance to see these spaces and spend some time there as part of our visit. So it's both a way to remember those who died, but also to contemplate what happened. And they've designed it very well to serve both of those purposes, both of those goals. And then as we leave, as I say, we'll travel that ring road back toward the main road, and as we're leaving this area, we will drive to the Tower of Voices, which is not visible on this map, about a mile or so up the road, but we will definitely stop there. It is part of the memorial and certainly an important part of the experience. Finally, I hope that's been helpful just to give you a sense of what to expect and what is part of what makes up this memorial. But I do certainly want to encourage you to visit other websites and consult other resources to get more information. These are two websites, and I'll send them out to the class by email. The first is the National Park Service site for the Flight 93 National Memorial. Provides a lot of information about the site and special events. So obviously an essential resource for you to consult. And then the second website I would highly recommend is the Friends of Flight 93 website, which is a wonderful complement and supplement to the National Park Service website. These are people who have devoted, in some cases, their lives over the last 22 years to keeping the memory of their loved ones alive and to preserving this important story. So the Flight 93 Friends site is another resource, another website I would strongly recommend. And then finally, some of you may be familiar with books or movies that have come out since 2001 that deal with this event. And there have been, I think, 4 in particular that I would call to your attention and recommend as resources you may want to review. And these are in chronological order from left to right. The first is probably the most authoritative account, even though it was written closest in time to the event. So oftentimes the most authoritative account comes later because there's more perspective and more time and space from the event. But this, in 2003, Jared Longman, a New York Times reporter, wrote this book about Flight 93, which is very well written, very well done. And I certainly would encourage you to consult that if you have not read it. Certainly encourage you to think about reading that to provide understanding about what happened. There was a 2006 film entitled Flight 93. Again, if you're interested in more of a cinematic portrayal of the events, then that is certainly well worth consulting. The 2015 book, Flight 93 by Tom McMillan. Again, this one has a bit more perspective because it was written a decade or more after the first book by Longman. You see there the foreword by Governor Tom Ridge, who was governor of Pennsylvania. So also a very good resource and serves as a nice complement to the Longman book from 2003. So reading those two in tandem, reading them together probably would give you the most comprehensive view of the event. And then finally, I wanted to mention a book by someone you may have heard of, Lisa Beamer. She co-authored the book with Ken Abraham, who assisted her with the writing of the book. And you may remember from the stories that emerged after the flight about one of the passengers, Todd Beamer, who's the one who said, "Let's roll," basically announcing to the passengers our attempt to retake the plane, our attempt to prevent the hijackers from using this plane as a weapon is we're going to do this. And he launched the effort with the phrase, "Let's roll." This book is by his widow. Todd Beamer's widow, Lisa, wrote this book entitled "Let's Roll." And it was written soon after the events in 2001. There was a 20th anniversary edition, which came out in 2021. And I think that's probably the one that's more widely available at this point. But it would also give you a very interesting perspective on Todd Beamer and his role in organizing the passengers on the plane to try and take it back from the hijackers. So I wanted to give you at least highlight these resources for you. Certainly happy to send additional information out by email if it would be helpful. But I think these 4 sources, as you think about preparing for the trip, would be worth consulting, or perhaps waiting until after we go to the site and come back. Having seen it, sometimes seeing the movie or reading these books can be more helpful and more impactful after you've seen the site itself. So I'll stop there and see if anyone has any questions or any comments. I hope, again, that's helpful as a preview for what to expect. If you have questions I didn't address, I'm happy to try to address them. The final thing I'll say about this trip is the fact that we're going to be meeting some friends and colleagues from the Penn State University York campus OLLI program, all of which developed because of a friendship I struck up with somebody involved with their OLLI program, a fellow named Charlie Hoffman. And Charlie and I got to talking about, could there be things that WVU OLLI and Penn State York OLLI could do together? And we thought of the Flight 93 Memorial as a great sort of meeting place where the two groups could come together and see something obviously enormously important, but also spend some time socializing with one another. So in addition to all of the things that you'll get to see and do at the memorial, we will then, and we will be with the Penn State York OLLI group at the memorial. We will meet them there, but we will also have the chance to have lunch with them afterward and get to meet some folks from Penn State York. So delighted that has worked out and that it has come to pass, that something Charlie and I have talked about for a few years now is going to come to fruition, and that is to bring the two OLLI groups together for a chance to socialize. So with that, I'll stop talking and certainly welcome your questions or comments or concerns, anything that I can answer that will help enhance your experience during the field trip. I'm happy to discuss. Questions or?
Hey, Jay, this is Duke.
Yes, Duke.
I couldn't tell by the picture on the voices, on the Tower of Voices. How tall is that? It looks like it could be very tall or maybe not.
You know, Duke, I don't know the exact measurements, and I'm not a great judge or estimate of heights. I'm going to say it's 100, maybe 125 feet tall.
There was something down right below it. Debbie said it might have been a bench, or it could have been a small trailer or something. I tried to use that as a perspective, and if so, then it's probably, you're right. That's up in the 100-foot range.
Yeah, let me go back to that. That's a good idea to sort of figure it out by perspective. Yeah, you can see here sort of a guidepost, which is maybe 3 or 4 feet tall. The bench here, I think that is.
Yeah, that's the bench we were looking at too. Yes.
And so, yeah, I'm going to, assuming that's maybe 3 or 4, 5 feet off the ground, we're probably between 100 and 120 feet from top to bottom on the tower. And then you can actually stand in the within the tower underneath all those chimes, which is where you get the best effect in terms of the audio. You can actually look directly up, standing in this space, looking directly up at the 40 chimes, and then hear the chimes. It's really very moving and very powerful.
Well, thank you, Jay. Yeah, that's I guess that's where all the chimes are, is inside of that structure.
Yes, everything this more light gray white is the scaffolding and the sort of the support structure, and then inside the darker gray material, these are the chimes, the 40 chimes, stretching almost the full height of the tower, and each chime corresponding to a passenger or a crew member on the flight. So yes, the outer light gray white is the scaffolding and the support. The dark gray on the inside are the chimes themselves. And again, when you see it, it'll be much more clear as to how it's structured.
Thank you, Jay.
Certainly. Okay, so okay, thank you, Leslie. 93 feet tall. Okay, so I overestimated by a few feet, but yes, 93 feet tall. So thank you very much for looking that up. One of the things actually that is even more impressive about the Tower of Voices, and again, you'll see this when we get there, is where it's positioned in the landscape. It actually is on a small hill of its own, opposite all of the Visitor Center Memorial Plaza area. And so it seems taller than that because it sort of sits on a natural rise. which gives it a very commanding view of the surrounding landscape. And again, in my opinion, just makes it that much more effective as a memorial. But it's just an extraordinarily effective memorial, I think. The tower specifically, and the whole site generally. Yes, Ingrid, to your question. Well, I as far as I know, I have been there 3 times since the tower was opened, and the chimes are working all the time. They are not electronic. I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear on this point. They are. It's not a matter of the chimes playing at a certain time. They are subject to anytime the wind blows and blows through that tower, through that scaffolding support, and strikes the chimes, you will hear them. So it's not like there's a set time at noon every day, or at a particular time every day. The chimes are electronically timed to go off. They literally play all the time in response to the wind that blows across this hilltop and into this tower. So when we're there, if there's almost any wind at all, you will be able to hear these chimes. Again, the 3 times I've seen it, one day was extremely windy and the chimes were really very active. But on another day, there was very little wind. And I thought, I wonder if there will be any noise coming from the tower. But even at just a very, very slight breeze, there was still noise coming from the chimes. So they respond to the natural wind conditions, as opposed to being electronically turned on and off. So we should be able to hear them when we are there. Any other questions or concerns? I will say, in terms of elevation and accessibility, it is a very accessible site. You can walk pretty much as much or as little as you prefer. They certainly have accommodations there for anyone who does not want to or cannot walk long distances. But if you do want to walk, that walking path around the ring road, around the Memorial Plaza, the ponds, all of that makes for a great walk. And I'm going to guess and say all the way around that ring road is probably a mile in circumference. So certainly a lot of room for walking if you choose to do that. But if not, all of the different elements of the site are accessible without a lot of walking. I think the biggest elevation difference is from the visitor center, which sits on the hill, down to the Memorial Plaza and the Wall of Names. And again, it's kind of a gentle switchback path with a lot of, and May, early June should be beautiful with the wildflowers. That's probably the greatest difference in elevation. But because it's a switchback path, the slope is very gentle, and there's no really sudden steep slope. It's all very, very gentle, which again makes it more accessible. But if you do not want to or are unable to walk down that overlook path, we can also arrange to have people dropped off at the Memorial Plaza shelter, which is on the same level as the Wall of Names. And so it's a very short walk with no elevation change from the shelter to the Wall of Names. So again, very well designed to be very accommodating and very accessible to everyone. Anything else I can answer or help to answer, or anything you would like for me to look up as a point to share before we go? I'm certainly happy to do additional research and get back to the group with information if that would be helpful. Well, if not, I said we might finish up a little early, so we did about 3:45. But I hope this is helpful in terms of. Well, actually, let me ask you a question for those. We've got, I think, about 30 people signed up for the trip, which is great. So this is a subset of that group. But let me ask those of you on the Zoom today, how many of you have been to this memorial?
I have.
Karen?
Twice.
Okay.
I was there probably that fall, 2 or 3 weeks after, when it was just the fence with a lot of notes and stuff stuck in it before they have ever done anything. And then I was there. I think when I was there, everything was pretty much done except the tower only had 4 at the time of the chimes hung.
Okay, so
But
you'll
it
have
is,
a chance
it's an
to see
amazing
the tower
place. It
finished.
really is nice.
Good.
I've been there also.
Okay,
Yeah,
Clark.
I've been there too.
Okay, Eleanor.
Yes.
Well, good. Well, certainly, I mean, is there anything that I've left out or missed or that you would add in terms of what you saw or experienced while you were there?
Not me. I think it was very comprehensive. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Well, I just, this is, I'm so excited about this because I think it's an extraordinary memorial, obviously a critical part of our history, a very moving and emotional space.
It really is. If you lived through 9/11, which I think probably all of us did, when you look inside the historical artifacts that they have and tapes and it's really difficult, frankly, to listen to some of those things and to see those artifacts. It really gets you emotionally, I think.
I could not agree more, Karen, and I think that's why such places like this, such as this memorial, are so important, because they make sure that we keep that history fresh and we have the chance to experience those emotions. We don't want to forget, that's for sure.
Exactly.
So I'm excited then for those of you who haven't been, and for our colleagues who weren't on the call today, excited for them to see it. I think it'll be a great trip. And again, I think the chance to meet with our friends from Penn State York will be a lot of fun. We'll send out a little more information about that probably next week. But in the meantime, if you have any questions or anything comes up and you want to let me know, feel free to email me or email the office. And if you have a question or a concern, let me know and I'll be happy to get right back to you with an answer.